What if official history you were taught isn't the same history found in public records? I'm going to give you some time to think about that. Hi guys, welcome back. Sorry about the wait, but I promise it will be worth it. In this video, we're going to do something very simple but extremely important. We're going to compare what the church teaches its members about the history and establishment of the World Mission Society Church of God with what documented records show about its establishment. Quick disclaimer, this isn't an attack on people. It's not a judgment on faith. It's an examination of claims. Because when an organization says it alone holds the absolute truth, its history better be consistent, transparent, and verifiable. Okay, so let's dive in. The history of Ahnsahnghong and the establishment of the World Mission Society Church of God as it is taught to its members. Ahnsahnghong was born in 1918. He was baptized inside the Seventh-day Adventist Church at the age of 30 in 1948, which is the start of a King David prophecy making him the second coming Christ. According to the church's teaching, he preached the truth of the Passover of the New Covenant within the SDA Church, but was rejected and expelled in 1962. This rejection is believed to have fulfilled a prophecy called the Seven Churches. In 1964, he established what would become the World Mission Society Church of God. On April 15th, 1984, he kept his last Passover inside a wedding hall to reveal that Zangyo was his bride, aka God the Mother, who had been hidden for thousands of years. In May 1984, he takes a picture with Zangyo as proof that she is our Heavenly Mother. Then, in 1985, an emergency General Assembly was held where he states, wherever Mother is where the head office will be. Ahnsahnghong passed away in February 1985, or they say he ascended, or they say he took a train to China. The church teaches that authority was left with Zangyo, aka God the Mother, and he left his will entrusted with General Pastor Kim Jo-chu. If you were taught something different as a member, please let me know in the comment section below. In the next section, we will compare what the church teaches its members with the records concerning the church. But before we begin, I want to ask the WMSCOG this question. Why does physical history suddenly not matter when it concerns their history? Research on the topic of the church is treated as a laughable matter. Why? When I was a member, we were discouraged from investigating Ahnsahnghong's physical life. We were told things like, there isn't much about Jesus' physical life, so clearly knowing every detail of it wasn't what mattered the most. Since the church teaches that Ahnsahnghong is the second coming Christ, the same idea applies to him. But here's my issue with that. We don't live in the first century. We live in an age of documentation, public records, and archives. And the church itself celebrates when physical evidence confirms biblical events. For example, an ex-member shared her experience when there was some study from researchers that suggested the sun had stopped rotating sometime in history. Zangyo, or God the Mother, said, this study is evidence that the event where the sun stood still for Joshua indeed happened. Even though that claim was later debunked and it was shared, there was no way to actually calculate if it happened or not. But I digress. So the question becomes, why is research and documentation welcomed when it supports the narrative, but dismissed when it challenges it? Yeah, so let's dive into public records and carbon footprints of the WMSCOG. During my research, I followed what's called a carbon footprint, paper trails that organizations leave behind. According to records, Ahnsahnghong established his church in South Korea called Witnesses of Jesus Church of God in 1964. It's important to distinguish between the original church Ahnsahnghong founded in 1964 apart from the World Mission Society Church of God, which documents show was established after his death. In a later video, we will compare the original teachings of Ahnsahnghong with the now teachings of the WMSCOG, but let's continue. Post 1985, the organization that is today known internationally as the World Mission Society Church of God emerged and formalized after his death. The church initially went by Witnesses of Ahnsahnghong Church of God, but later decided to rename itself for a more international approach. According to the IRS documents, the date of establishment is 1999 or 1998, and the founder is listed as Pastor Jujo Kim. This desire to take the church overseas is documented as following what he described as a divine revelation to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ throughout the world. Unfortunately, I did not see Ahnsahnghong's name on that document for anything. So the claims the WMSCOG makes about its establishment is not supported by public records. So what are we to think? They changed their name twice, and why not put on the document that it was established in 1964? If it was indeed established in 1964. Also, can I add that they had got the mother who was leading the church? If she is God and she is leading this organization, why is she not listed as the founder? But to wrap this all up, the church was established by Jujo Kim in 1999 or 1998 after receiving a divine revelation. Ahnsahnghong established Witnesses of Jesus Church of God in 1964. And here's something else worth asking. The church loves when artifacts are discovered that support Jesus or biblical history. So why, when official documents surface about Ahnsahnghong, are those documents suddenly discredited? Which brings us into our next topic, the baptism controversy. One of the most important claims in the WMSCOG is that Ahnsahnghong was baptized at the age of 30 in 1948. Why does this matter? Because entire doctrines like the fig tree prophecy and King David's study depend on that date. These studies are ones that testify that he is the second coming Christ. First, let's start with what multiple groups agree on when it comes to Ahnsahnghong. There are 3 groups connected to Ahnsahnghong: WMSCOG, World Mission Society Church of God, NCPCOG, New Covenant Passover Church of God. We will touch on them in a later video. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Hyundai, South Korea, the church attended by Ahnsahnghong. They all agree on the expulsion year. They all agree that he was expelled in 1962. However, when it comes to his baptism, they disagree. So how did everyone unite on the expulsion year, but not the baptism? Anyway, let's compare documents with claims. Seventh-day Adventist Church in Hyundai, South Korea provided a document stating Ahnsahnghong was baptized on October 9th, 1954. World Mission Society Church of God claims that there is evidence that Ahnsahnghong was baptized in 1948. The evidence? He wrote it in his Bible. And they really drive this evidence home by having Zangil Ja share it through an emotional video. But get this. This evidence is not even available on hand for members to see freely. Not openly, not freely, not even upon request. When you compare the evidence provided by the two, let me know what you think in the comments. Which one is more believable? In my opinion, the SDA Church had nothing to lose in sharing that document. But for the WMSCOG, their whole organization would crumble. I believe when a foundation of a doctrine depends on a single document like that evidence should be transparent and readily available. Even public records acknowledge this issue. On the Wikipedia page for Ahnsahnghong, a 1948 baptism was written to be performed by a pastor, Lee Myo-duk. Forgive me, I don't know Korean. But when you try to research him, no record exists with a pastor by that name. Please keep in mind this page is heavily influenced by the WMSCOG. So I'll let you take from that whatever you will. Next, let's get into Ahnsahnghong's personal life. Ahnsahnghong was married in 1958 to Ahnsahnghong, forgive me, I don't know Korean, and had 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. Daughters born 5/15/1948, 1/26/1957, sons born 8/12/1954, and 6/11/1959. So records indicate some children were born before that marriage. According to the WMSCOG, sexual immorality is considered an unforgivable sin. So naturally, this raises difficult questions. Did God come and commit sexual immorality, an unforgivable sin? If the church excuse is he came to fulfill the throne of King David, Didn't King David commit sexual immorality? That's actually fulfilling some sort of Bible prophecy. This is where critical thinking becomes non-negotiable. Do not let anyone weaken it, silence it, or take it from you. According to the World Mission Study Church of God, WMSCOG, Ahnsahnghong is God. If that is true, then his character should reflect the character of God. When we look at how Jehovah and Jesus responded to sexual morality, their position is very clear. Jehovah was deeply displeased with King David when he committed sexual sin that led to the death of one of his loyal soldiers. Although Jehovah showed mercy to David, David was still punished. Jesus also took a clear stand. He told Mary Magdalene to leave her life of sin. What kind of sin? Sexual sin. So the question must be asked, are we being told that God came to the earth and did the very thing he commanded us not to do? This is where critical thinking is essential. Use it. Next, let's dive into Ahnsahnghong's ministry. The church teaches that Ahnsahnghong preached the truth of the new covenant for 37 years. However, the historical timeline creates a problem. If he was baptized in 1954 and expelled from the SDA church in 1962, then he remained an SDA member for 8 years after his baptism. Even using an earlier date, for example, the 1948, he would have still remained in the SDA church until 1962, totaling 14 years as an SDA member. This leads to a serious question for WMSCOG pastoral staff. If Ahnsahnghong was still a member of the SDA church, a church that does not keep the full truth of the Passover, how could he have been preaching the full truth of the new covenant during those years? In other words, how can the claim of 37 years of preaching the full truth be reconciled with the fact that a significant portion of that time he remained within a church that, by WMSCOG's own teachings, did not possess or practice that full truth? Also, he was expelled from the SDA church in 1962 and later claimed to have established his own church in 1964. That raises another question. Why the 2-year gap? I researched Korean laws in the 1960s regarding the establishment of churches. At that time, there was no legal barrier preventing someone from immediately starting a church, in a practical sense at least. A person could gather believers, choose a church name, hold worship services, and meet in homes or rented spaces without delay. Even the church's own narrative acknowledges that followers were already meeting in small places for worship. So if gatherings and worships were already taking place, then in the sense, the church was already established, right? This leads to a reasonable question. When was the church actually established? Was it 1962 or 1964? He did not leave the SDA church alone. He left with approximately 20 members. From a practical and functional standpoint, a church already existed. The later date appears to mark a formal organization, not the beginning of the movement itself. This distinction matters, and it deserves honest examination, in my opinion. Next, let's get into Ahnsahnghong's books. In a later video, we will get into the writings of Ahnsahnghong, but for now, I will stick with 2 of the most controversial writings. Ahnsahnghong wrote approximately 19 books. Only 5 are available to regular members. Sources indicate that WMSCOG does not hold the copyrights to much of Ahnsahnghong's original work. Those copyrights are held by the church associated with his physical family, which is where most of this information has been obtained, as it is made freely available to the public. Many of his teachings were inspired not only by other religious leaders or writers, but even the writings of his own followers, which we will get into later. Right now, let's look into 2 books that caused great controversy inside the church, and after I share, you will know why. It's because some of the writings contain clear end-time predictions that didn't happen. So the 2 books we're going to look into are The Bridegroom Was a Long Time in Coming, and They All Became Drowsy and Fell Asleep. This was published in 1985. And The Mystery of God and the Spring of the Water of Life, published 1980. and this is before it was edited. In The Mystery of God, he writes, "You know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all of these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. It will surely come to an end at that time." So here you can see Ahnsahnghong predicted or prophesied that the world will end. Details on this matter is made publicly available on the Examine site, which I will share below. But in 1988, many of his followers even gathered on a mountaintop in anticipation of this event. When the prediction failed, those records were quietly removed. My overseer told my husband and I that Zangyoja had that information taken down. In the same conversation, he claimed that the world not ending in 1988 was actually the fulfillment of another prophecy. According to the church, it paralleled the story of Jonah, in which God had pity and spared the people from destruction. But that explanation raises an obvious question. If the failed destruction was itself a valid prophecy meant to demonstrate God's mercy, then why remove the original prediction at all? Why erase the record instead of preserving it as proof? If nothing went wrong, why the need to cover it up? You see where I'm going with this? Now let's look into the bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. He writes, "Therefore adding 168 years to 1844 when Jesus entered the heavenly most holy, 2012 becomes the last day." Here we can see yet another failed end-time prophecy, and I say failed because 2012 came and went. But for a moment, let's entertain the claim that Ahnsahnghong's 1988 prophecy was somehow valid, and the explanation involving Jonah's prophecy was true. The reasoning goes like this. God spared his people in 1988, but believers were warned to stay alert because another prophecy still awaited fulfillment. The argument continues that people would grow drowsy and fall asleep because God delayed his coming. He didn't come in 1988, but he will come in 2012. Yet, once again, it didn't happen. There are countless testimonies from former members who say they were directly told by pastoral staff that the founder, Ahnsahnghong, who they claim is God, declared that the end time would come in 2012. When that year passed without incident, many people left after realizing the prediction was not true. If you are a believer in the Bible, remember Jesus' own words. It is not for you to know the times or the dates. He even said that the Son does not know, only the Father. So ask yourself this. Does Ahnsahnghong display the characteristics of Jesus? Not only did his predictions fail, but they also directed people to focus on the very thing Jesus explicitly told us not to focus on. Personally, I never worried about the world ending until I began attending this church. I encourage you to read the full chapters for context. Next, last but not least, after death. Ahnsahnghong died on February 25th, 1985. His death led a division in the church. Out of 13 churches, 11 accepted the teaching that Ahnsahnghong was God and the doctrine of God the Mother, and the remaining 2 that contained his physical family decided to stick with his original teachings. And from that split, 2 groups emerged, WMSCOG and NCP-COG, New Covenant Passover Church of God. So there you have it, guys. Again, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm here to examine claims and offer my support. Listen, I'm just asking whether the history we were taught matches the records that exist. Truth doesn't fear examination, and faith doesn't require blindness. A big thank you to those who spoke up before me, who documented, questioned, researched, and left, even though it wasn't easy. Stay informed and stay curious, guys. And I'll see you in the next video where we will dive into the church splitting into 2. Bye.